Hi everybody, I'm the Drink Pro, and today we're sampling Kentucky Owl Batch 8. Thanks for joining me, everyone. I'm so happy to see people are still watching this channel, still engaging with the Drink Pro, and still trying to enjoy whiskey like a professional. One of the things that's been a great consequence of putting these videos out into the world is people are sending me samples. And I love this. I love being able to try new things. I love being able to explore the world of whiskey in ways I can't necessarily do with my budget. Even though I've got a lot of whiskeys, it's still relatively modest in the world of whiskey. And particularly with bourbon right now, it's a very hot commodity. A lot of people are buying it, and it's hard sometimes to get your hands on some of the rarer pours. Kentucky Owl is a great example of the gold rush in bourbon. Kentucky Owl is a blended product that doesn't have a lot of transparency around it. They are sourcing whiskey, bourbon particularly, but they won't say how old the barrels are that they're using or where they're getting them. Now, sourcing is a pretty common practice in whiskey, and it's becoming more common in bourbon now that there's been a big rush and people are interested in the products. But I'm a little skeptical about any company that won't release where they're getting their barrels, or won't release age statements, or they won't release the blending process. That kind of gives me pause. Kentucky Owl Batch 8 sits at 121 proof, and the particular bottle that this came from was opened on 12/20/2019. Now that's important because understanding how long whiskey has been open can definitely affect the flavors. If you just break a seal on a whiskey and get what's called the neck pour, the first pour out of the bottle, it's going to be a very different experience than the last pour out of a bottle that's been open for almost a year. Now, a lot of young distilleries are sourcing their whiskey. Sourced whiskey is being distilled at one place, someone else is buying it, and they typically change it. Now, they don't have to. You can buy a barrel and bottle it yourself and send it out the door without doing anything to it. And that's still acceptable, legally speaking. But a lot of young distilleries are buying source whiskey and then making slight changes. They're finishing it in different barrels, they're blending it in different ways, trying to find a new profile that they can sell either as their own or as a new brand while they can raise funds before they start making their own distillate. The process of distilling whiskey is not that difficult, but the aging process takes a long time. It takes space and time and money. So typically your distilleries are going to find other ways to raise funds before they start releasing whiskey. Gin and vodka are common choices for clear spirits to help raise these funds. I've also seen companies use limoncello, orangecello, things that are sort of infusions. There's a lot of ways you can raise money, but sourcing whiskey is actually a good one because it's still releasing whiskey product. It's making the name and the company familiar with a whiskey drinker. All that being said, Kentucky Owl doesn't have a lot of backstory out there that people are going to be familiar with and comfortable with to trust the distiller or to trust the age or the mash bill or anything like that. There is a master blender blending these Kentucky Owl blends, and if you know you like their palate, you have a good chance of liking a Kentucky Owl product. But that's hard for a lot of people to rely on, especially because they're not necessarily going to be as well known as something like an age statement where people get very comfortable with the kind of age they want on a bourbon, for example. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pour myself a pour of this Kentucky Owl. Now, batch 8, they've been doing this for a while now, and each batch is going to be blended differently. I haven't seen a lot of reviews of batch 8, to be honest. I did a quick glance, and I tried not to look at the tasting notes or the nosing notes, but I wanted to have a sense of how often people have tasted this, so that in the future I can look and see if I agree or disagree with their palates. One of the things that really is worth doing in that regard is when you get a new pour, taste it, figure out what you think about it and what you find before you look at any reviews. This is best done with things that aren't expensive, that aren't rare, things that you know you can afford to buy and you know are readily available. Once you've done the tasting and gotten your notes written down, you can compare those notes to other tasters. Comparing those notes to other tasters really offers you an opportunity to see, do you agree with someone's flavor profiles, or do you disagree? Do you think that you like things they will, or won't you like things they will? There are people who I have very similar palates to, but they like things and I don't. We'll both find a very bitter tannin from a barrel, and I won't care for it as much as they will. So understanding how you feel about your own palate, what you look for in a whiskey, is critical. There is no wrong way to drink a whiskey, but there are things you can do to really improve your experience and to minimize any, buyer's remorse from bottles that you thought you might like, you heard were good, but it turns out you don't like what other people like. Let's go ahead and smell this Kentucky Owl. For something that's 121 proof, this Kentucky Owl is very gentle on the nose. I'm getting vanilla, which I expected. Almost a dusty corn, or like an old storage silo of grain. Those kind of notes actually can be really common in certain styles of bourbon. The more I sit with this whiskey, the more burn I'm getting on the nose, which is really the opposite of what I tend to expect from a whiskey. So that really is highlighting something interesting for me. The vanilla character is starting to come out a little more as I sit with it. I'm definitely getting some orange peel, but it's still hiding behind the corn and the dusty corn sweetness. I'm not getting a lot of baking spice out of this. I was kind of expecting to get a little bit more. Maybe a hint of clove or a hint of cinnamon, but it's very soft. It's very minimal. I know I've given a lot of flavor notes on this, but the nose on this whiskey honestly is not that interesting to me. It smells good. It doesn't smell offensive. It doesn't smell like a particular flavor I know I won't like, but it's not particularly interesting either. Kentucky Owl is almost always over $100, so to not have a very exciting nose really concerns me and gives me pause. I believe this bottle is actually a lot more than that, depending on where you found it. Let's give it a taste and see what we think. Some whiskeys can be deceiving on the nose. Wow. Yeah, there's a lot of heat on the back end of this. You get the barrel bitterness on the finish and the tannins, but there's a lot of heat that just is consistent throughout this pour. And it doesn't really seem to go away. That heat is just there to stay. I mean, I gotta be honest with you guys, this whiskey is not very interesting to me. I really have a hard time not taking price point into account. For a whiskey that's over $100, it better be very interesting, very complex, or very delicious. You know, you can have an expensive whiskey that's simple but really good, and I'll be okay with that, but there's not a lot here that I like. So the initial flavors are pretty quiet. It's definitely sweet. But man, it get overtaken by the heat, and there's a very sharp barrel bitterness. A lot of pepper and spice on the back end. This is very much a spice bomb mid-palate finish with a very soft opening. Very sweet but soft, uncomplex, uninteresting opening, to me at least. And again, there's no wrong way to enjoy a whiskey. If you love this pour and you find different things that I'm not pointing out, that's fine. That's totally your prerogative. Don't feel like I am the end-all be-all authority of this. I'm offering my perspective, my opinion, and a lot of experience in the whiskey world as to what I like and what I don't like. I think a lot of people are going to pick this up and be disappointed by the level of complexity being rarely low. I mean, it's going to punch you in the face, but it's not interesting. It doesn't keep coming and going. The Stag Junior pour I had, in contrast, hits you hard, but it's very unique. It's complex. It unfolds. There's a lot going on. I don't get that kind of complexity from this Kentucky Owl. Going back to the nose after tasting it, I get a lot more caramel and woodiness, maybe even like a toffee. And the clove has sort of turned to brown sugar after tasting it. It is a very hot pour, so, you know, that kind of thing can happen. I wish I had more good to say about this whiskey. I mean, it's very nice for a friend of the show to send this pour with me. I really appreciate it. I've been wanting to try Kentucky Owl for a while. It's got very mixed reviews. Some people swear by it, some people hate it. Some people just don't like the lack of transparency in the process. I think I tended to fall into that last category, but after tasting it, it's just really not my thing. With whiskeys that are this high a proof, though, it's very important to try them different ways, and so I'm going to add a little bit of water to the whiskey, and we'll see what that does. Bloop. Ooh, okay, this is interesting. So adding some water, the nose is really opened up. I'm getting a lot more of the caramel, a lot more of the toffee. The citrus notes have gone away, the wood notes have gone away. It's suddenly very like butter pecan pie. It's really good. There is a very pie crust note to it as well. That was not there at all in the beginning. So let's go ahead and give it a taste again with some water added. Oh, and see, that's so disappointing. There's a hint of caramel on the front, but it doesn't change that much on the palate. It doesn't open up as beautifully as it does on the nose. It's still got that burn. It's still all woodiness and bitterness. I just can't say I'd recommend this. I can't say I'd recommend Kentucky Owl. It's just not my thing. I can't get behind this. I'm sorry. I hope you guys have learned something from this, because I'm not going to give all positive whiskey reviews. So just letting you know, sometimes I'm going to find pours I don't like, and I will not be afraid to tell you about it. Thanks all for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. Click the little bell so you get notifications. The only way I can keep making these videos is if you join me and keep paying attention, keep watching, keep sharing, and stay engaged. I love doing this with you guys. I love being a community of whiskey drinkers, and I want this to be a great, interactive, enjoyable experience. I'm so glad for sharing a sample with me. That's the kind of thing that helps keep this show running. Keep drinking, keep enjoying yourself, and hopefully soon we can be drinking as a bigger group like professionals. Cheers.